All right, everyone ready? Cool, great to see so much interest in DevOps. There's been a lot of sessions this week about tools, the Visual Studio Team Services, Azure, automation, PowerShell, everything else. So I thought I'd put together a session from lessons that I picked up from quite a lot of different teams inside the Microsoft engineering, but more from a more cultural changes in the team perspective rather than technical. So this is in the track that is the non-technical track. So hopefully I meet the expectations of the track with you. And I have a few stories to tell here that are pretty cool from engineering, from a few different teams at Microsoft that I've been talking to up there in Redmond. Bing, Azure, Visual Studio Team Services themselves, and a couple of others, the OneDrive team. So I'm Thiago Almeida, NZ Thiago on Twitter. Follow me there, and that's my session. So let me see what's going on here. Let me just get that going properly. All right, that's better. That's a phrase from Ed Blankenship. He's in the team services team. And at Microsoft, we're unifying a whole bunch of different practices and tools. There's no more Windows versus Office inside Microsoft from an engineering perspective. There's a lot more sharing of the code and sharing of the lessons that the teams have. And we're all converging into using team services as the one place where companies can go to and put their code in, use that for continuous integration, continuous deployment, management of work items, and et cetera. And that's, if you think about it, that's more than just forcing the teams to use their tools. When it gets to a vice president or executive vice president, they don't really, you can't just go and tell them, now you're going to use this tool to put your source code. The teams are free to do whatever they like internally. So it's really great that there is this unification going on because the teams are figuring out that they can benefit from sharing all of this. So I have the numbers here. There's over 43,000 internal users, daily users of VSTS, and climbing pretty rapidly inside Microsoft. So it's one big VSTS account that most of the engineering teams at Microsoft are now sharing to put their code, do builds, continue integration, run automated testing, and all of those other little practices that you see coming up when you're talking about DevOps. So the first lesson that I wanted to call out is team responsibilities. Especially, this is very particular to the team services team. They started focusing on systems thinking and splitting up the teams into feature teams and made a few changes inside how the team is organized to work towards that focus of getting the whole team to be responsible for what gets deployed to production and getting feedback from that. And if there's a problem in production, the whole team is responsible for it as well. So in the past, this is what the org chart used to look like inside team services. So we had 3 roles inside a feature team: the program managers, developers, and testers. And then separately, there was the operations team. Or maybe if you're in ops, you prefer it to look this way. So the ops team is here, and there were 3 other teams. But the point is, it was the testing team and the org structure was separate from development. So they started to notice that then that was a wall that didn't need to exist inside the team. So what they've done is that they changed that role of developers and testers to become just software engineers, and everyone in there was responsible for the quality of the code. So that's what it looks like now, where you still have this is from a reporting capability, right? So you have program managers that understand the requirements, help drive the team, and then you have the engineering team, and that's everyone doing dev and test and making sure that things are working. In operations, we call them now service engineers, that they do also have to understand more of the architecture of the application, but they are focused more on the infrastructure part, but they're all together. From here, then this is the org chart, but then inside the organization itself, then they are split into feature teams. So say, for example, in Visual Studio Team Services, the team that works on the build feature of VSTS, they are a feature team, and they're usually cross-discipline. So you have one PM, one engineering lead, a whole bunch of those software engineers that are devs and tests all in one, and then one or two of the ops engineers there as well. And it's usually 10 to 12 people in it. They're self-managed, so they have their own Kanban board and their own work items. They can define how they work with those. And they're pretty much autonomous, so they handle their own backlog, right? And that stays intact for at least 12 months, maybe 18 months, without changing that team. So just as an example for the numbers that we have there, just because you might be in a startup of one person, or you can be in a large company. So in this case, for the developer division of Microsoft that create Visual Studio, Team Services, and a bunch of other tools, there's about 4,500 people, 4,500 people, and then around 500 in the Team Services part that create VSTS. And then in there's around 40 feature teams that are split up into this way. This seemed to be working really well for the feature teams, and I'll cover a few more examples of why. The other thing that they've implemented is the feature teams themselves. So each one of these at the bottom are feature teams. They send reports up that goes to everyone, including upper management. So everyone gets the report. So the upper management, or there's no intermediary manager that's going to say, what's in your backlog? What's your technical debt situation? Do you have any big issues that are going to block you? They just report it every sprint. They report what they're planning to do the next sprint and what they've done in the previous one. And that goes up to everyone. And so it's an easy, open way of sharing that was implemented into the teams as well, so that everyone knows what everyone else is doing. There's more clarity between the teams. And then that sort of encourages collaboration as well, because if you're thinking of doing something that might be cross teams, then you know that where the other team is, and then you can meet and discuss it further. Another story that I really like is how they've split up the teams into team rooms. A lot of people hate open plan, and I think this is a good compromise where if you walk around the campus there at Microsoft, go into some of the engineering buildings, there's what they call neighborhoods or team rooms like this, where that feature team is in there. So any conversation that people are having that are work related should be related to the feature that whole 12 people in that feature team are building. And then the other neighborhoods or the other team rooms around, they're also part of the same team services area, but what they're building here is that one feature area, right? Which seems to make a lot of sense, and then makes people share the conversations a lot more about what they're building. And this story, it's pretty easy. You can go to stories.visualstudio.com, and in there, let me show you here. So if you go to stories.visualstudio.com, there's a few different stories here. I'll talk about the Bing one later on. But this Our DevOps journey here is the most interesting one for me, because it talks about what I've been talking about so far. So you can read quite a bit about it there. That's how we combined engineering, made it into a feature team, and then they are all responsible for delivering to customers. But also, there's a little table here that I find pretty interesting, that it talks about before this change of combining dev and test, bringing engineering, ops engineering into the feature team, and everyone in there is responsible for understanding what goes to production and what comes back as feedback from the users to the team, it changed a lot from ops to to the whole team. So DevOps, and I don't like to call teams DevOps teams, but it went what was just ops, now it's everyone is responsible for that. And that makes a developer, for example, think a lot more about what you are building that is not going to destroy production, for example, because you're the one that's going to get called and go and help fix that issue, right? And of course, you're going to make sure that this is behind a lot of tests and that there's feature flags before it gets to everyone. And that's another thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. The interesting one here is change management. So for each one of these, you can expand it later if you want to read more about it. But the decision that some code is ready to go to production now, especially because the software engineers now understand where the code is going to production a lot better, it's up to the dev team. So the dev team, through code commits and by kicking off builds and et cetera, that triggers that code is going to make it to production. It's not dependent on an ops team that will block it before it gets to production. So it's one of the leads in the dev team that will decide, okay, let's commit this. It's accepted the PR, and that takes it through all the way to the production. It might still be behind a feature flag or be deployed to an environment that's not for every user that you have there, but it is a production environment, right, that it gets deployed to. Okay. So definitely check that out, stories.visualstudio.com. One quote that I really like is this one. We're giving control to the engineers and the authority. So if you develop, you test it, then you run it. And if something is broken, then you also have to fix it. And that's really nice. It empowers the developers, but also makes them think about what they're creating. And the whole team, of course, the ops people that are in the team as well. Another story that's pretty particular to the team services team, I'm not sure if other teams at Microsoft do this, is, you know how I said that those feature teams, they're pretty much intact for 12 to 18 months? So every so often, after a year or a year and a half or two, they go through this exercise where the teams can self-form. So there's some companies I've heard that they just let the teams form however they want to do. But the team services, they meet with the upper management of that team. They decide which features they want to focus on for the next year or two. And then that becomes the features teams that are going to be made up. They identify some specific individuals that will be the leads for the engineering and the program management side for it. But then they get everyone in a big room. They go up and say, this is, each one of those lead program managers for that feature goes up and says, oh, this is what we're going to be building. This is why it's going to be pretty cool. And then they give each of the software engineers and testers, well, I guess one software engineers now, 3 different pieces of yellow sticky notes. And you can just go and say, this is my first choice, this is my second choice, and this is my third choice for a team. And the team sort of self-form there. Sometimes there's a little bit of management that will have to happen so that the teams are formed like they should. But Brian Harry, the lead for this whole VSTS organization, he is pretty impressed with how much at the end of the exercise, especially for the last one that they ran, they didn't really have to do much to just make sure that all the teams were formed. They sort of self-formed there. And that makes sense because then you know that the person chose those because those were the places that they wanted to work at. And those teams form, and usually you do have reorgs anyway at Microsoft. Every couple of weeks you hear about, oh, there's this reorg, that reorg, and in this case they just self-form the teams again every so often, which is a pretty cool and interesting feature. If you once you get these slides or watch the recording again, you can go to Brian Harry's blog and find it. I emailed him just before coming up to ask, is this still happening? Because this was from July 2015 and said, yeah, we're still doing that every couple of years or every year and a half, and it's working pretty well. So go and read that blog post if you want to learn more about that crazy self-forming team idea. So a few lessons that, so far from this. That makes it shared responsibilities for the team, for the feature team. So you're deploying to production, of course, with Azure and other cloud computing now and automation that enables. It makes it easier for a team to say, oh, yeah, we own everything all the way to production, because I know that it'll be a specific VM or a specific web app that's going to be hosting my solution, right? But responsibilities and accountabilities are shared. There's an increased sense of accomplishment because you're seeing what you're deploying to production, and when we talk about telemetry, you're also getting the feedback of what you deploy to production as well. It makes you a little bit more obsessed with understanding your customers because you don't want to screw up from the beginning, and of course, it forces the team to try to automate as much as possible. So it drives a lot of benefits to what the team is doing. So the next one is flighting deployments. In VSTS, they say deployment rings. So what that means is that you create a solution, you create part of your product, and you deploy it to production, but to a production that is only enabled for a certain amount of people. So maybe if I go here, next one. From your dev machine, it goes to one environment, and that's where the VSTS team run their own VSTS accounts. So it's sort of like an inception. They're using VSTS to update VSTS. And the team will know exactly, if something broke because they deployed that, they will know straight away, and they'll be able to roll back or fix it. Once that's done, then they expand it to some insiders, like Donna kept talking about the Windows insiders. They have their MVPs and other teams that they deploy to inside Microsoft and outside. And once they're happy with those and they've tried it out, they deploy it to production for everyone, then to all the other deployment rings that they have across multiple data centers of Azure, and behind a feature flag still. And then once it's up in production and they see that it's stable, they enable the feature flag for everyone or for the people that they want to. So it's sort of like not only feature flags, but feature flags being deployed to, being exposed to more and more people. So what that looks like, just to show you here in VSTS. So this is the VSTS teams itself, so msengineering.visualstudio.com there, and they have all of these rings that are environments that they use Visual Studio Team Services Release Management to deploy updates to production. So this environment, if you've used VSTS, you can make one environment depend on the other. So one environment depends on the other, or sometimes you can have approvers, people that will approve for it to move to the next one. And that's how the deployments go from ring 0 with just the VSTS team to all the other rings where more and more people get exposed to this, right? So that's what this does. And the benefits, let me bring that up. Another example of this is with the OneDrive team. So I keep talking about VSTS, but this can be done with anyone. So if you've been to any sessions this week that talk about Hockey app, that's another similar idea of deploying to early adopters, right? So you can do a Hockey app of a mobile, a phone update to Android, to iOS, to Windows that goes only to your immediate team. Then after that, the deployment goes to a larger number of beta testers. Once you're ready, maybe if you're going to Android, then you deploy to Google Store, but only to a percentage of users, and then enable it to everyone. So you can also do these deployment rings for mobile applications as well. It doesn't have to be a service that's a web-based or an API-based. So what the OneDrive does is pretty similar. So they test it locally, of course. They run their updates. It goes to through VSTS into Hockey app to early adopters. Then it goes into Test Flight because it's the iOS app. And Test Flight exposes it to more users, to up, I think, 2,000 users. Then once it's ready, the update gets deployed to the App Store itself. And it might be behind feature flags or not. So even then, you can still add feature flags. So this is what the settings can look like on the app itself for you to enable one or two feature flags. So some of the benefits of doing it this way is that, of course, you can control the exposure, and you find out early if there's a problem. It does support early feedback. So as soon as you start deploying it, you can see nobody's using this, or people are complaining, or there's actual real bugs with the deployment. So that early feedback allows you to go back and fix or change the direction that your code is going as well. And it sort of makes you start thinking about experimentations, because you can do this more often and get feedback early and say, oh, let me try this instead and see if more people get interested in it. And then it makes it pretty granular as well. So another thing that I started noticing from Microsoft, this is probably not very DevOps-y related, but it's just getting direct feedback, going out and asking, creating a community around giving feedback to you. That's a lot of what Donna's Windows Insiders is doing, is to getting direct feedback. So this is from Outlook on a Mac, my Mac here, Office feedback on Windows. Bing also has a little, send me feedback, I don't like this image, or why do you even have images? Azure Portal, of course, there's a little button on the side for you to send feedback. And this goes with the telemetry that you have of what people are actually doing, but there might be subjective things that people will write up and send to you that you don't know until you ask. So having that option of sending feedback is pretty important. The last one here is the OneDrive for mobile as well. You can say, contact us, and that goes back into a list of tasks behind the scenes there for them to read all of those in a tool that we have called Parature. So it sends all the feedback to that, they review it, and then they identify, oh, maybe we should add this as a feature that we're going to implement in our next sprint because it's been asked for so much. And of course, I'm sure a lot of you already know the user voice. It's very popular. If you use a lot of our products, then we're increasingly adding user voice support for it as well. And the teams do really use this to decide which features they want to focus on. Some of them might be difficult, so it might take a few sprints for it to actually come out, but they take this very seriously, the number of votes and comments that they get on the features directly from here. Of course, the lessons here is it helps increase quality and develop a community around your tools that get people engaged and say they want to help you make the product better. Again, gets your feature teams themselves become obsessed with understanding the customers, and then increases the customer satisfaction overall. All right, next one is experimentation and telemetry. So we talked about getting direct feedback, deploying early to customers, but you can do quite a lot with just experimentations and gathering telemetry about which areas your customers are going to on your website most of the time. Why are they getting to the purchase order page and they never click the actually buy button, things like that. So this is an experiment. It's a very famous one by Bing, where there's an experiment there. Those two are different. And all that they did was change the color ever so slightly from light blue to a little darker green to a little darker green, and the black became a little lighter. And as you can see there from the text, that change for some reason made people click the ad links a lot more than they were clicking before. So just the color of the links themselves. They don't know why this happened, but it was just an experiment that they did, and they noticed, no, people are clicking more on this. And then they enabled it, and that ended up over $10 million annually in ad revenue for the Bing team just because of this experiment. So once you have your solution set up so that it enables experimentation like this, then you can start playing around with it and finding changes that will be beneficial to your customers or bring more revenue to you, right? So that's the lesson there. Here's another example from the Visual Studio Team Services team. They wanted people a lot of people were creating an account, but never really creating any projects in there, and they would stop right there. And that was the original one. And then now when you sign up, I don't know, that might even be old, but when you sign up, the first thing that it does is, create your project here. And that increased the conversion of people creating their first project to 100%, because basically when you sign up, it already takes you through the creation of the project itself, instead of making it optional and with a lot of text around it to get in the way of things. So this also increased the conversion there. And just to have an example that's for mobile, just like I've been having with the other ones, that's the OneDrive for Business app. If you want to, they tested a couple of ways, a couple of buttons to get people to increase the amount of storage that they have on their OneDrive. And this is the view of the tool that they used in the back end. And this, you can see the result was very positive, because it went up to 99% of increase on the button being present there. So based on the original, they added a little button there to get people to come into the settings here to say, you should increase your storage. Before they didn't have that. People had to go to settings and then find the storage thing. They just added that little icon there. And this was a massive change of difference into how many people actually went in there and bought more OneDrive storage. So I guess the lesson here, one of the lessons here is that data is better than opinion. You can trust the data of the telemetry that you have, as long as you have the proper data science behind it to understand this is actually better. It will be better than just an opinion of maybe upper management decided, no, we're going to do it this way, but then you show them, but nobody's clicking on that, or we trialed it with a few accounts and that's not working. So if you have the data, it helps quite a lot. So it helps you with finding out if a feature is useful and successful. It reduces technical debt. It helps you prioritize, help decide, because you will have just so many things that you can work on. It helps you prioritize there. It captures unaccepted error scenarios as well. And then finally, it forces you to instrument everything. So even if you are not looking at improving an area, if you have instrumentation there, it should be pretty easy for you to then go back and analyze the data to figure it out. I talked a little bit about feature flags before. I don't know if everyone knows about feature flags, but this is a feature that you can implement basically just with if-else statements if you want to. It can be just as simple as that. But it's basically you are deploying the code to production, but you're not allowing anyone to see it until a flag is enabled for the person, or you can do it per country or time-based. But as long as you enable that feature, then it'll go into the part of the if-else statement that will then enable this feature that you implemented and deployed to production. One big feature of this is that it decouples engineering from marketing. In Microsoft, there's a big marketing engine together with engineering, that engineering is working on features and marketing is going, we need to prepare to talk about this, create presentations, create the website for it, and et cetera, update the documentation. And this allows, the first thing that feature flags allows for Microsoft is just letting engineering deliver that code into production behind a feature flag. And once they've tested it and it's ready, and then marketing is ready, they can just enable the feature flag for everyone, for example. Controlled exposure together with the deployment rings, feature flagging is pretty good for that. You can, depends on the team, I have control via PowerShell, but you can do feature flagging by many other ways to enable and disable it. There's a company here that they put it behind, they make sure that in production, feature flags are only enabled if you commit that change into the web config with the feature flag enabled or not in production. So UAT and others, you can change it yourself, but for production, it's in the commit so that you have traceability of the combination of flags and et cetera. So push pay the company from here, if you see them presenting in any other conference, they do feature flagging quite a lot as well. And the last one there, conferences and launches. You know, if you've watched Build or other big conferences for Microsoft where they say, we're going to enable this for you tomorrow. If it's a service that's pretty easy to enable, they'll just enable the feature flag instead of doing a massive deployment. So the code is all there already. Another one that Bing does quite a lot, but it's becoming apparent throughout the whole company, is running hackfests and hackathons to get the people that work for your team to come up with ideas in a day or a week and deploy those and test it out, and then those might become an actual product for the company. So there's quite a few things. There's internally there, you know, the company-wide hackfests, one that's just inside Bing and other teams. They even have this Bing incubator that works as if it was a startup incubator, but inside Bing itself, that you go there, you pitch the idea to this management team, and if they like it, they'll invest money and allow you and others to spend time on just working on that idea for the product. And that gets, you know, the engineers' minds going, saying, wow, I came up with the idea, now I get to implement it. I have support from management to go out and do it. So that's an example there. We have every June, July, we have this 1 week hackathon, and teams can get formed around Microsoft and work on a specific idea that they have. That was 2-3 years ago, where a team, they built this, what was it called? OneNote for Learning, and they built this to help with classrooms and teachers and students to learn, the teachers to add content and the students to then learn from that through OneNote. And that then eventually became a real thing inside OneNote itself. So it's just learning tools add in there for you to add to OneNote, which was pretty cool for that team, and it became a part of a Microsoft product. This print screen is a little strange, but it's just a drawing from a whiteboard from someone on the Bing team itself. So that's why that's the other story from the stories.visualstudio.com. That's the Bing continuous delivery. So they got to a point where they not only have all of this automation for things to be deployed to production, but they also implemented this thing where you can even create visuals of what you want to change and send it out to crowdsource it to a bunch of people for them to vote and say, yeah, that sounds a lot better than what you had before, or this difference that you're trying to make makes sense to me. And then after that, you can then build it, deploy it through their system, and they have something like 20,000 tests for any deploy that they do they do, I think, 20 or a few more per week. It goes to production behind those, and then they get the feedback from production as well. And if it still makes sense, then they just keep it there. So it's going one step further from the rings and feature flags, but also basic little experiments that you have like thousands per month of those to identify little changes that you can make. It's a little bit more advanced. Once you have everything else in place, this starts to make sense as well. Right? So for that, when I asked Craig Miller about how did you get to this stage, what kinds of requirements do you have to get to this stage, and he'd sent me this big list of things. So the first one is having a culture that supports creativity, the infrastructure that makes sense for you to deploy fast, easily, and that empowers the people that are creating the experiments, capability to analyze and validate ideas, be ready to fail quite often and a lot. Do it sustainably, so don't just run a hackfest today and never do another one again. Datacom is a company here that does this at least once a year, that they repeat these hackfests, and that incentivizes the teams to keep innovating there. And live-side first culture, so they worked quite a lot at Bing to make sure that their uptime and other areas and that their exceptions are all doing well before they got into this thing of, let's start experimenting. So what's the point of trying to experiment if your main thing isn't working, right? So that's definitely a requirement. And of course, metrics, data over opinion, we talked about that before. So have that metrics culture in place first so that you can tell if the experiment is working or not. So it's the highest paid person override sort of goes away from when you have the data to prove it. The product decisions are made from customers, so that sort of applies to most of what I talked about today is getting direct feedback, learning from experimentation, getting the data itself from telemetry. That makes you decide on what you're going to build in your product from real customers, not from what you think is going to be right or not, right? And again, incentivizes creativity. And then improves a lot of the other things that we sort of consider DevOps practices, like continuous integration, continuous delivery, automated testing, release management, and other parts as well. So the whole automation and getting feedback from your customers. So I have just one more slide here. And this is one of the most important outcomes that the teams are seeing is that not only by enabling this and empowering the teams, it also makes them really like working for you. So especially there was an increase on the. This is between 2 fiscal years. I won't say which team, but it was just a specific team inside Microsoft that went through all of this, and there's no necessary rules getting in the way. So that went up. The work group changes processes, improved productivity. That also increased. But this one, it was pretty dismal before. But the scores for the work-life scores went up quite a lot. So very, very successful outcome there. So it turns out that if you empower people, you remove the unnecessary parts that your employees don't have to really do, but empower them to deliver that value to their customers and learn from customers, it also makes them happier to work for you. So that's what we're seeing in a lot of the teams inside of engineering at Microsoft. So if you want to learn more, I had those links before there as well, but the engineering stories, it's either stories.visualstudio.com or aka.ms/engineering stories. If you want to learn more about VSTS, since I called it out a few times here, aka.ms/VSTS. And we have this show as well. We interviewed a few people, not just from Microsoft, but from other companies like Nordstrom and others that are doing the culture part of DevOps. So we have a few interviews there if you want to go and check out the interviews as well. And with that, that's all I had to cover today. Quite a few different lessons from Microsoft, I guess, from an engineering perspective, but from the culture side of it, that is changing quite a lot of how we do things. Do you have anyone have any questions? Otherwise, just come up and see me, and I'd be happy to talk to you. All right, thank you.